Welcome to Beyond the Razor Wire Fence. I'm Kelly Sheard, the director of the Gender Wealth Institute within Women's Way. Our mission is to advance gender and racial equity by building collective power to disrupt systems of oppression and strengthen alternative models centered in inclusion, love, and liberation. Over the last 7 months, Women's Way facilitated a narrative change fellowship with 7 women and gender-expansive individuals with experiences of incarceration and reentry. With help from Love Now Media, our fellows honed their storytelling skill set to advocate for economic equity in Philadelphia. This podcast centers their stories. Beyond the Razor Wire Fence asserts that incarceration is a form of wealth extraction. Moreover, through this podcast, fellows depict the disproportionately deep impact for women, trans, and gender-expansive people. The fellows' stories dive deep into how the carceral system perpetuates the gender wealth gap and calls attention to the institutionalized strategies of extraction before, during, and after incarceration. Through a combination of interviews, storytelling, and research, the fellows challenge assumptions around incarceration and advocate for a shift in policy and culture to move us closer to a liberatory economy.
This episode features Ivy Johnson. We'll hear from Ivy, listen to her in conversation with our friends from Love Now Media, and finally, we'll welcome a guest, Elizabeth Johnston from the Family Services of Montgomery County. I'll sit down with Liz to add some context to the terminology and information presented in Ivy's story. Welcome, Ivy.
This episode contains mention of intimate partner violence, murder, and substance use disorder.
Hello, my name is Ivy Johnson. I'm an outreach coordinator for a nonprofit, a psychological first responder, and a social justice and anti-violence activist. I was born into the gender wealth gap in 1968. I was the first one in my family history who was born first out of wedlock and second to a father who wanted absolutely nothing to do with them. I often heard my grandparents say, Ivy needs extra help. She doesn't have a father. And as time went on, the running insult in my family was, your father's a jailbird and you're going to be a jailbird too. It was as if darkness was spoken over my life. And that darkness showed up in my life in sexual assault, domestic violence, rape, drug addiction, and yes, just as predicted, incarceration. In 1997, I found myself trapped in a relationship that I could not afford to exit. So after doing some work on myself, I sought employment. Finally seen some light at the end of the tunnel. Only later realized that my then boyfriend had gotten the phone number changed so potential employers could not contact me. I was devastated. And my irrational response to that, to him doing that, was to go out and get high. As a result of me going out and getting high, I was convicted of the same crime my father was. And I served 18 and a quarter years as a state correctional institution in another toxic and abusive relationship. But this time it was with the PA Department of Corrections, where employment was mandatory. I had all kind of jobs. None of them paid more than 19 cents an hour. I made $22 a month. Out of that $22, I had to purchase soap, lotion, deodorant, and feminine hygiene products. It cost you $5 to see a doctor or a dentist. I often found myself opting out of seeing dentists unless cavities got so severe that I had no choice but to go. In 2015, I was released from prison. And shortly after that, I had to have all my top teeth removed. My call to action is that the 13th Amendment that basically says if you're incarcerated, you're a slave, is rewritten. people who are incarcerated cannot afford to stay healthy. Health is wealth. And this is extracted from people who are incarcerated through wages and labor. So I ask all of you to read the 13th Amendment, be appalled, and take action. Thank you for letting me share.
I'm Jas Duncan Ashe of Love Now Media, and today I'm going to be speaking with fellow Ivy Johnson. It's been such a pleasure working with you, hearing your story, feeling your energy, your passion for advocacy, for just your work in general. Ivy, I think with some of the stories we've heard, a lot of them have been, they've taken us on journeys to really show us how the system is designed.
Yes.
And what else did you do while you were incarcerated that led to your sense of confidence when you were released?
I guess my confidence comes from basically wanting to show homage to my victim. I was convicted of third-degree murder, and I never want my victim's death to be in vain. Everything I do is for her and her family. And redemption, for correction of my soul, my spirit. I have to give back what I took. And I do that by trying to save a life. The only way you can make amends for taking a life is to save a life. Mm-hmm. And I try to do that every day.
Can you talk about what you've learned about the gender wealth gap during this fellowship and how your experiences prior to incarceration may have been impacted by the gender wealth gap?
Well, first of all, I didn't know what the gender wealth gap was until I spoke to you guys and you guys taught me about it. So in trying to draft my story, I was trying to figure out where did the gender wealth gap come in? And only to realize it was always there for me. Mm-hmm. But there's only one male in my lineage per generation. My great-grandfather, Uncle Buddy, my brother, and then my nephew. Mm-hmm. So I have a family full of matriarchs. And I was forced to look at all the sacrifices these women made throughout my life so I could survive. Mm. Staying in abusive relationships, walking away from abusive relationships with nothing. I remember me and my siblings and my mom holding my baby brother as we escaped my brother's father under cover of darkness because she was being abused. The gender wealth gap has always been there in my life. Mm. And I learned that through this initiative.
So did that change the way you looked at your experience with the carceral system and just your journey overall?
It changed how I looked at everything. Mm. It changed how I looked at everything. I know that I don't want to be a failure. A failure as a woman, a failure as a citizen, a failure as a returning citizen. Mm-hmm. It lets me know that I have to win. I have no other option but to win. It's too much history on my back for me not to win. So that fuels me now.
I love that so much. So one of the things you talked about during the fellowship was parole and the way the parole and probation system is designed. Can you talk about your experience with that?
So in 2015, I was released from prison to be on parole. So I'm on parole in Philadelphia, but I have fines and court costs to pay in Lycoming County. Mm-hmm. So I pay those monthly, the fines and court costs. Right now, I also pay supervision fees for parole every month. Yet I only see parole once a year.
Wait.
Yes.
So break that down.
So I'm on something called special circumstances, which means I'm doing really good on parole. I haven't reoffended. I haven't had any technical violations. I'm allowed to travel and things like that. I'm doing really good on parole. My file is so minuscule, you wouldn't even believe I was in jail that long. Yet I have to pay every month to be supervised, but I only see the parole agent once a year.
So you pay
Yes.
to be on parole.
Yes. You pay to be on parole.
Wow.
And the only reason why I'm not paying for urines as well is because I am on special circumstances.
So what do you mean paying for urines?
Like if they come and give you a urine where you make sure you're not on drugs, they charge you for that. Everything on parole is a fee attached. There's a fee attached. I've finally worked my way down to owing less than $1,000 in fines and court costs. And I've been paying it since 2015. I'm finally down to $990, I think.
Wow.
Which I wanted to throw a party for. Because I can't apply to have my record expunged or commuted or anything until those fees are paid.
And at one point you expressed feeling like you were constantly trying to get your freedom, even once you were released.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Because your freedom isn't free. Your freedom costs money. So coming home from prison, I have a 18-year work gap. So my first job paid me like $8.25 an hour. So now I'm paying rent, I'm paying gas, electric, and still trying to pay supervision fees, fines and court costs. And let's not forget that student loan that I got in 1986. That was $2,500 when I got it. That's now $9,000 some dollars.
A student loan?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
So, Ivy, what has the process been like to find your footing? Like, to my understanding, you've just stayed focused. You've done some things with your housing to make that secure. Like, what have you done on the other side of your incarceration?
So, a lot of people think it's hard to get employment when you come home from prison, which is true. But the thing that is more difficult to obtain is housing. I went through so many housing issues. I went back to the halfway house twice, which is another atrocity. My brother put me out. I lived at a place where the person I was sharing the place with relapsed on drugs. I had another landlord that asked for sexual favors. I had 2 places that had water running down the walls. I went through a lot with housing issues. So at one point, I just said, I'm going to buy a house. And a lot of people said, well, that's pretty big aspirations for someone just coming home from jail. But I sacrificed. I cut my hair off. I stopped wearing makeup. I stopped wearing lashes. I was shopping at the thrift store. Every penny that came in my hand went towards down payment on that house. And finally, in 2001, I was able to purchase a house. Finally. And God is good.
All right. That's amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. So in terms of your advocacy these days, what are you advocating for?
I am advocating for that 13th Amendment to be rewritten. There is nothing in the Constitution, this is among other things as well, there is nothing in the Constitution that should support slavery in any shape or form. That is one thing. I am also advocating for long-term parole to be sundown. Like, I should be able to earn my way off of parole prior till 2038 when I'm scheduled to be off. I should be able to work my way off of there. And as it stands, I cannot.
A note of context from Women's Way. The 13th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution states the following: neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the parts shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. At the end of the Civil War, the passage of the 13th Amendment was meant to partially replace chattel slave labor with incarcerated labor. Essentially, the 13th Amendment allows for involuntary servitude where convicted of a crime, meaning if you're incarcerated, you can be legally forced to work. This sort of captive labor leaves incarcerated workers vulnerable to exploitation. They are not subject to workplace protections, minimum wage laws, overtime protections, or the right to form a union. 2/3 of the incarcerated population are workers, working as cooks, dishwashers, janitors, groundskeepers, painters, repairing roads, clearing debris, and more. The vast majority of incarcerated workers, or 80%, perform maintenance work for the prisons. The average minimum hourly wage paid to incarcerated workers for non-industry jobs is 13 cents, and the average maximum hourly wage is 52 cents. Incarcerated women may use the funds they make in prison to send money home to loved ones, or pay for basic necessities, or acquire job skills to use once out of prison. However, prisons deduct from their pay to pay for court-appointed fines, taxes, restitution, and room and board.
So can you talk about this? So work your way off of parole. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so I'm doing well. I haven't had any offenses. I haven't had a hot urine. I haven't had any police contact. I haven't did anything to break the rules of parole. Yet, I am not going to get off parole till 2038. And I should be able to earn my way off. After maybe 10 years, I should go back in front of a judge and say, hey, she did good on supervision. Let's let her off.
Right. Well, is there anything that you want to ask the listeners of this podcast to do to back what you're asking for?
I want the listeners to back me saying that I am not the same person that went into the prison. I don't see life the same. I don't think the same. I don't move the same. I don't even have the same friends. So if I change, my system can't change. Help me.
So how? What can we do? What could I do?
Speak to your legislators. Speak to your political people around you. Speak, work. Look at us as human beings. Look at us as people who deserve to be free because we're good people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ivy.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm Adira Chanat. I'm the Gender Wealth Institute Program and Data Manager at Women's Way, and I'm so excited to be welcoming a guest to the podcast. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Hi. Thank you, Adira. My name is Liz Johnston. I am a reentry coach and a CPS and a CRS. And for those of you that don't know that is a certified recovery specialist and a certified peer support specialist.
I love all the acronyms behind the name. So we've been talking a lot in this podcast about incarceration, and we've also been using this term reentry, returning citizen. And I think I just wanted to take a second to kind of rewind and really try to wrap our heads around what this term is, where it came from. Because I know incarceration, but I feel like reentry is maybe a newer term. So I guess my question is, what is reentry and what is its relationship to incarceration?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So reentry is the process or a process that individuals go through when they are coming out of incarceration. So it actually starts pre-release and continues post-release. And really, it's an individualized process. So it can be particular to the person. So everybody goes through a different journey, right? So what my reentry process was, it might be different for somebody else. So in the work I do as a reentry coach at Family Services, we work with individuals approximately 3 months before they're released, and then approximately 9 months post-release. And basically, the point is to get them ready to get back into the community and get acclimated with the community again and with everything that's going on, and connect them to the resources that are available to them and make sure that they're ready, basically, as ready as they can be.
That seems like such a necessary support system. Has reentry services been a part of Montgomery County Family Services for a long time?
So, Family Services has actually been around for over 100 years, and we have a bunch of different services. We serve adults or individuals of all ages. We have a number of programs from older adult services. We do Meals on Wheels. We do a lot of preventative programs in the community. And then approximately 15 years ago is when we really saw a need in the community for those reentry services. And originally, the reentry initiative was solely for women. It was just the Montgomery County Reentry Initiative. It was a women's reentry initiative. And then we saw that, those same services were applicable to men. So they were extended to men as well. But what we have seen is that it is a female-dominated industry, human services in general. But we do serve more males than females. But I will say, as a female, I feel that we do have specific needs that men do not have, particularly, as mothers, childcare needs. There's a lot more that a woman faces than men do while incarcerated. I think it's a little different when a female is incarcerated compared to a man, because when a woman is incarcerated, then her children are left, and there's so many other things that go into that. It just hinders so many more things in a woman's life than a man's.
So when you're coming out, there's a lot more support you probably need in terms of there's a lot of systems that you have to navigate.
Right.
Now.
So it's kind of like men are almost expected to, it's okay for them to be incarcerated, but it seems to be more stigmatized when a woman is incarcerated.
Okay, I want to dive deeper into all of this, but first I want to know how you came into this line of work. How did you become a reentry coach?
So I became a reentry coach. So I am a reentrer myself. So I have lived experience with incarceration, and while I was incarcerated, I knew that I wanted to be an advocate for those individuals who are still incarcerated once I was released. And when I came home, I knew that I had to get an education to get ahead in any way. And so I went back to community college, and I was very apprehensive about what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure, and I was just taking random classes. And so I took this one class, and it was a criminal justice class, and I had this amazing professor, and he told me about the work he was doing in diversionary courts and in the different types of treatment courts. And I was so intrigued by the work that he was doing, because I thought, oh man, if these courts were around when I had gotten into trouble, how amazing that would be. And I felt comfortable enough to share my story with him. And so I made that connection with him, and he actually referred me over to Family Services and the reentry department, and to who is now my supervisor, Elisa McBride. And I was really apprehensive about making the phone call, and I got encouraged, and he finally kind of pushed me to make that connection, and I did. And I started volunteering there because I was scared, because like I said, I am a reentrant, and being that I have that status, it's risky to be employed, to ask to be employed somewhere. It can be risky. So I started volunteering there, and built up a good relationship with them, and eventually did my internship there for college, and became employed there. So it was just a long story, but
yeah, but following something that felt right for you.
So it just felt right all along the way. And what I think was most important about it is that I networked with the right people who were supportive of me, and I reached out and found those people in the community that were supportive, which is hard to find at times.
Yeah, especially like you said, for people who are in reentry, being able to find a good stable job.
Yeah.
I'm so excited that you've been able to find this work and kind of do some of the work you wish you would have had access to.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of our fellows throughout the interviews have talked a bit about healthcare access, be it access to reproductive products, reproductive justice products, or even just plain healthcare inside and then post-release. I was wondering if you could speak to that from your experience as a reentry coach. What is access to healthcare like?
So my experience has been that most of the healthcare that's provided to individuals who are incarcerated, the healthcare is minimal. It's usually poor, and a lot of times the healthcare is contracted out, so it's usually given to the lowest bidder. So if you got healthcare from the lowest bidder, you can imagine how that would be. So, and then normally when an individual is released, they're lucky if they get a few days medication. So as a reentry coach, it's important for me to make sure that my clients have that continuum of care and that they're connected to the resources that they need once they are released. So that is a huge part of my job as a reentry coach, is to make sure that those needs are met once they are released.
Mm-hmm. So overall, looking at reentry in your work, what do you think for specifically women and gender expansive people are the supports that are needed but are not available? What would you like to see there be more resources around?
I'd really like to see more support for individuals coming out by the whole community as a whole. When I say that, I mean the stigma. I mean acceptance. I mean just loving each other as a community. I guess when I started, I said that re-entry is a process that individuals are coming back into the community. But I truly feel that the individuals who are incarcerated are still a part of our community. They're our citizens. So to me, we should still be treating them like they're our citizens, even though they are incarcerated. With that being said, we should love them just the same and accept them into our lives just the same. 1 in 3 adult Americans have a criminal record. So this is not something that's abnormal. It's not something that's taboo. It's just something that's not talked about. And that's what I want to be the change. That's what my call to action is acceptance of your neighbor, of your sister, of everyone around you. Because what does a re-entrant look like? What does somebody who's justice involved look like?
Yeah, it could be anybody. It could be,
yeah, it could be anybody. It could be me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I often get that, that people say are shocked when I tell them that I have justice involvement. And when I tell my story, or when I have family members who are more sensitive to others who are justice impacted, and that to me is probably one of the best things that's come out of my incarceration, is that it's allowed other people to be more sensitive and understanding that we're all human and we make mistakes. There's just some of us that got caught and paid the price for it. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We so appreciate your expertise and time.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Razor Wire Fence. This podcast is brought to you in collaboration with Women's Way, Change the Narrative Fellows, Love Now Media, and Little Drummer Boy Recordings.